Welcome to Chromatic Roses, a podcast where a couple of Midwest women cultivate a community at the D&D table. I'm Soren.
And I'm Caitie, and this is a new location. Get used to it. But like in the best way possible. We are this week in the Rose Garden, we're talking about game settings. We found a twisty. This week in the Rose Garden, we're talking about game settings, which is a lot like a story setting, but where you play a game instead of read a book. But maybe you might read a book.
Yeah, and
anything's possible.
To clarify a little bit more, we're talking about game settings, kind of like game settings that we'd be most interested in playing in, kind of like a wish list. Places you might not have heard of, thought of, played in yet. Fingers crossed. If any of you have played in these settings that we talk about here soon, please let us know your experience, because we'd
about your
love
stuff,
anecdotes.
So.
Yeah. Ain't nothing to it but to do it.
Started. We're going to start with Outre Space.
Oh my goodness. Oh yeah, I do have it backwards in the notes. I'm sorry.
No, it's cool. I figured it out. We're going to start with Outre Space.
Yeah.
And you might be saying, that's vague. Yep.
It is vague. But there are, when we were doing research for this episode, we found out that there are so many categories that can go into playing an outer space game. I think lots and lots of D&D players immediately just think of Spelljammer and or just like Star Wars based RPGs, which are totally valid. You can also play those. But as we were talking a little bit more about Spelljammer, we realized that we weren't quite looking for like swashbuckling, like pirating outer space, kind of Treasure Planet style. We were looking for a little more like true to space and a little less magic-y.
Yeah, so I don't know that there is a genre of outer space that we're particularly, like, I don't think we could articulate the genre of outer space that's quite where we're at. I think we are vague on purpose because there's a lot of sections of like sci-fi outer space stuff that like is intriguing.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we started doing when we were looking at game settings were like look up TTRPGs that exist within that setting or modules that exist within that setting, i.e. Spelljammer. And there is a Reddit thread of sci-fi RPGs. And the sub-settings for science fiction include broad-focus sci-fi, broad-focus transhumanist sci-fi, broad-focus space opera, starship crew, thematic approaches, mechs, cyberpunk, cyberpunk plus, science fantasy, franchises, and adaptive approaches. And within each of those sub-settings is just such a huge list of TTRPGs that already exist for outer space settings in these, sub-settings. So I think the thing that came to mind when we were putting this together was just like, oh boy, you could pick any of these.
Yeah,
and they
it's
would
a little overwhelming.
Yeah, right. And like in thinking about how we would go about picking it, I think we would have to like sit down with whatever group we were playing with and say like, okay, what is the vibe? And do any of these fit that vibe? Or, and this will come back as a theme today, do we want to just take D&D and reskin it to make sense for the setting that we are most interested in? The demons.
Oh no.
No, I love it. Keep it. Yeah.
Chase your tail. Oh, he's sitting. What?
Did you vanquish the demon?
Yeah.
Thank you. He's such a good protector.
They're always up in that corner.
Well, I mean...
They watch us.
Well,
okay,
anyway.
I think he'll be okay. The fact that there are so many options and it can be so overwhelming. So there is also the option that we can, I think I know where you were heading to, can I attempt?
Yeah.
Okay. To reskin D&D rules.
Yes, yeah.
So this is something that you mentioned when we were researching this episode, was that Dimension 20 does this a lot with a lot of their different themes and campaigns that they do. They take their idea and then like copy paste the idea over existing D&D rules.
Right.
So that they can have different personas and different like characters that don't exist in normal D&D.
Right. So instead of thinking about like homebrewing entire classes, which is also possible.
Yeah.
Instead of homebrewing entire classes, if that feels too overwhelming, maybe you take a paladin and like take your space paintbrush and put space on him. You know what I mean?
And you make him a Jedi. You know what I mean?
So like there's ways to take your creative, exciting idea without having to switch an entire system if you don't want to.
Yeah.
And stay in something familiar while taking this creative setting and making it your own.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about some of the ones we found, the TTRPGs we did find?
Yeah. When we were looking all of this up, we found a couple of options that seemed more popular than others, but there are very many. So this is not a comprehensive list. This is just a few of the ones we've found. I'd still say Spelljammer counts. There is another system called Diaspora, however you want to state that.
Which, to quickly summarize, is based on an older edition of Fate, won the Golden Ennie in 2010 for Best Rules. It contains a number of interesting approaches to sci-fi exploration play.
Yeah, so there is Diaspora, and then the other one that I saw that looked really popular was Traveler.
One of the earliest sci-fi games, has seen nearly a dozen different versions, all of which still have their adherents. Some versions are famous for cases where your character can die while being generated. The OGL portion of Mongoose Traveler version 1 is known as the Cepheus engine. So this is all on the Reddit like list that we found of sci-fi games, which I'm sure TJ will pin for us in the
description comments wherever.
And like we said just 2 right now, right? There's probably 25.
She's scrolling.
More than that, probably 30. Different kinds, and they all in this list. It's nice. There's like a little quick sentence about what these kind of feel like. There's one in the Starship Crew section called Rust Hulks, a game about, in quotes, playing space truckers in a grimy science fiction future. So there's like so many ways you can go about it. The Diaspora and Traveler were in the broad focused sci-fi category. So that sounds to me just like all encompassing sci-fi. But I mean, space operas, if you're into that, you've got Archives of the Sky, a tabletop story game of galactic scope and threatened ideals. Won a Judges Spotlight Emmy in 2019. You've got from like the thematic approaches, you've got one called Blue Planet, in quotes, offers hard sci-fi adventure on the ecologically wild, socio-politically contentious frontier of Earth's first extrasolar colony world, a distant water world named Poseidon.
That is the longest way I have ever heard someone spell the word strategy.
In like a mech, an example of a mech, I'm trying to find one that seems... No, we'll just do the one that TJ mentioned earlier. Lancer RPG, centered on shared narratives, customizable mechs, and the pilots who crew them in the future. Cyberpunk, Black Code is one. A transhuman cyberpunk game, in quotes, set in a future where humanity and technology are intermingled so closely we don't know where we are going next, using a toolkit approach. We both weren't sure exactly what Cyberpunk Plus... Oh, it says right here. Cyberpunk worlds with fantastical elements without quite reaching science fantasy.
Huh.
So Cyberpunk Plus, there's Ascendancy, Psychic Cyborgs, Identity, and finding yourself through fighting for what you believed in based on the same engine as The Spire. Science fantasy, Equinox, a space RPG, action, intrigue, and mystical powers in a war-ravaged dark future, system agnostic setting guide, and a choice of 2 system books, Match System and Rules Light story game system, the latter being a pure permutation of Freeform Universal. And then you've got your franchises, which are what you exactly what you think of them to be. Do you want to play in the movie Dune with Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet? You could. Dune, Adventures in the Imperium, a journey through the storied worlds of Frank Herbert's sci-fi masterpiece. Unsurprisingly, there's 3 Star Wars RPGs, Star Wars the role-playing game, Star Wars role-playing game, and Star World Streets of Lost Isley, amongst many, many others. So there's just like so many to choose from.
Yeah.
Yep. So Outer Space, it's been done. And that doesn't make it any less cool, but that does mean you have more to choose from.
Yeah, and I guess something that I'll bring up about Spelljammer while we were talking with TJ about it, because he knows way more about it than we do. In Spelljammer, since there is more of like a pirating, like seafaring type of component, you have to really focus on like ship mechanics and stuff. So there's that whole part of it. So if you're more interested in like making a ship like do what it's supposed to, then that might be right up your alley for science fiction. Right. Sci-fi. Whoa. I don't know what I just said there.
As far as characters go, I think when we were both talking about this, we're like, Star Wars.
So easy.
It's just like you've got the archetypes kind of already there. And as always, you should and can like subvert those expectations.
Yeah,
so these aren't what you have to do, but these are what you could do. I'm going to say the one that I said first. So you've got your smuggler Han Solo type, kind of your anti-hero. It doesn't want to be here, but he is. That kind of a thing. That would be really easy. Has a gun, kind of a vibe.
Yeah, I think one that didn't come to mind immediately, but after I gave it some thought, it did, was being someone who is being completely like taken out of their normal day to day, who has like maybe a little bit of like the Han Solo streak where like they didn't ask to be here. Right. But I was thinking of Maz from Star Wars, who owns, I can't remember the inn / like establishment she owns in Star Wars, but someone like Maz, I'll see if we can find a picture of her to put on the screen, but she is this business owner who does lots of like political deals and like hides a lot of secrets, but she like knows everyone, and eventually like helps Rey to like, you know, claim her power as a Jedi and like face that fate. But she's got this little bit of like an everyman kind of energy. So I think it'd be fun to play someone like that who is like well established in their business or something. And then they get whisked away to like go on some kind of space adventure. And maybe it's like a one more adventure before it's all over. Yeah. Like, I don't know. I just thought that was kind of a fun thought.
I'm kind of thinking through the like D&D classes, like if we were to reskin a la Dimension 20 D&D for the sake of Outer Space. Paladin seems really approachable from the like Jedi Knight standpoint. D20 did an Outer Space one. I don't know that they used D&D. Starstruck Odyssey.
Oh. LOL. Oh my gosh, it looks like the Yellow Submarine, but it's a hot dog.
It's based on something that Brennan's mom wrote, I think.
Oh.
I think it's a comic
that I haven't Brennan's watched this one.
Wrote. Yeah, because that's her. Elaine Lee sits down with her son to talk about the Starstruck multi-universe. Yeah, multiverse. So they did this. So if you're looking for inspiration for how to handle characters and stuff like that for an Outer Space campaign, I turn you to Dimension 20's A Starstruck Odyssey. it's a tough galaxy out there, but somebody's got to live in it. It might as well be you. And I don't, like I said, I don't know if they use D&D for that or not. As to whether like they reskinned or used,
or if they use a different system.
I'm sitting here realizing that I have the power of the internet to tell me.
What?
Campaign based on Elaine Lee's stage play, Starstruck, and Lee and Michael Kaluda's comic book series of the same name. Star Wars 5th edition is what they used.
Okay.
Emily Axford as Sundry Sydney. Okay. So, I mean, some of their classes aren't going to make a ton of sense because we've not played Star Wars. But, like, Emily Axford played Sundry Sydney, Android, a Rin android, Path of the Corsair Sentinel, Gunner Rank 2.
That all makes no sense to me.
Yeah. Brian Murphy played Big Berry 6, Human Clone, Ballistic Approacher, Berserker. Yeah, these aren't going to ring anything to us specifically, but yeah, I mean, you get the idea, right? So like they just, instead of reskinning D&D for that one, they use Star Wars, but they're not playing in the Star Wars universe, which is another option of how you can make this work for you. Because one of the things I was thinking about in D&D, like how do you reskin magic for the sake of a space? And depending on the kind of campaign you're running, maybe you just have magic and it's like that cyberpunk plus where it's like there are some fantasy elements. But if you're looking for a true to space, Western kind of they have laser guns and whatever, maybe reskinning Star Wars, you're not playing in the Star Wars universe, but you're wanting those kind of mechanics. That would be the way to go about that.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to keep trucking through, or do you have more you want to chat about for
I think that was the most I wanted to say about Outer Space, but I'm ready to go on to the next one.
Great. You say this one.
Yeah. So our next game setting that we think would be really fun to play in is a giant library. But I'm going to have to be a little more specific. So I had this idea of it would be so cool if this whole group of people were in a huge library, a huge magical library, and they get sucked into storybooks, fairy tales, all that jazz. And in order to get out and to achieve either your goal or solve something, you have to make the story finish as it's written, essentially. Or I guess a fun way would be to break the cycle of how the story is written. Either way, you're trying to complete a story so that you can get out of the book and get into the next book and get to your goal at the end of it. And so I said this to TJ, and he looked at me and said, "That's literally Candlekeep." And so I guess my emphasis, my interest would be to utilize actual fairy tales from our own reality that people are comfortable with or familiar with. So things like Sleeping Beauty or Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, or even folk tales that people are familiar with. And the reason for that is that I feel like that would help drive a little bit of playability, because everyone kind of knows how the story goes. So then it might push players to be like, okay, well, I already know that this is going to happen. So how do we make it happen? Or, how does that progress? But I think that would be really interesting and fun. And when TJ mentioned Candlekeep, that sounds amazing. So I think the big thing would be reskinning some of those books to maybe fit more of our reality fairy tales, or changing the fairy tales a little bit so that they're more inspired by where Candlekeep is based. But yeah, so that was the big thing that was interesting to me. I would really love to play in a setting like that.
Candlekeep was the famous library fortress that stood proud as a bastion of enlightenment and knowledge on the Sword Coast for many centuries. It houses magnificent collection of books, scrolls of lore, so all of those things would still make sense with what you were talking about.
She's on fandom again, y'all.
Well, it's just where this stuff lives. I don't know.
I'm so sorry, TJ. I hit my mic.
I was gonna try to see if it had like a example of some of the things you could do within Candlekeep, but it's not showing me that. But yeah, that could be interesting. And that's already in Forgotten Realms, so that's already like D&D based. Did you see anything about D20's season of Never After?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so they took...
Please tell me it's not the exact same concept.
No, it's not.
Okay.
Never After is the first hardcore horror-themed season. Is darker than previous seasons. The show's original intrepid heroes take on the role of a traditional fairy tale character with a macabre twist in their fairy tales. So Never After explores the nature of stories and their destiny. A world of fairy tales and fables comes to life in Never After, welcoming you to a strange land where the stories of old coexist with terrifying, bone-chilling results. A princess in a tower has slept too long, trapped in briars, and surrounded by fallen corpses of princes who tried to rescue her. A young woman wearing a red hood journeys through the woods, lamenting the horrors of a wolf wrought upon her family.
Wait, you're just describing the musical Into the Woods.
A once cursed prince finds himself slowly turning back into a frog. These are just a few of the stories that populate the strangely familiar world of Never After. And there is a warning in the descriptions of these episodes, excessively graphic and uncomfortable.
Oh.
Or provides warnings in the descriptions for anything excessively graphic.
Oh, I see. So they'll give you a heads up.
Heads up. But like, for instance, for that, what do you think would be more interesting to hear about? The prince who turns into a frog, Pinocchio, Puss in Boots, basically your Sleeping Beauty, Mother Timothy Goose, or Ylfa Snorgelson, which is your Little Red Riding Hood.
Oh.
What would you like to hear about, class-wise?
Tell me about the Frog Prince.
Frog Prince, coming right up.
If the link...
It literally worked right before this, so, like, don't even pretend, because it worked right, but, like, I literally, checked the link, but there we go, thank you so much. Prince of Greenlee, the Frog Prince, he is a fighter, a battle master fighter.
That's odd.
Let's do another one.
Okay, do Red Riding Hood.
Okay. Barbarian.
I love that idea of Red Riding Hood being a barbarian.
She's a Path of the Totem Warrior barbarian.
I wonder if a wolf is her totem.
And she eventually, and perhaps spoilers, I have not seen this myself, she multi-classed into Druid, Circle of the Moon.
That is so cool. That's so neat.
So, that's also an interesting way to go about that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What if, I guess you'd have to have enough characters in each fairy tale, but if each storybook that you were pulled into, the entire group takes on, inhabits the role of all of the characters in the story. So it goes away from being a little bit Kingdom Hearts-esque, where you're pairing up with the heroes or the main characters, and then your party is just becoming them, and they have to solve how to finish the story.
Pinocchio is a warlock. Pact of the Chain. And Puss in Boots is a rogue.
I wonder if the Pact of the Chain requires that you can't speak about certain things, or can't lie, or I'm not familiar with Pact of the Chain.
So, Sleeping Beauty is a level 5 ranger, Swarm Keeper Conclave, but she multi-class into Druid and Fighter as well.
Jeez.
So there's just some interesting ways to go about it. I really like looking at Dimension 20 for interesting reskins. They do it so well, and they've done it so much that they're really good at taking interesting, Sleeping Beauty as, whatever I just said, Ranger. Because she's, the Briar Rose kind of situation. That's kind of an interesting connection. And Puss in Boots being a rogue, like, makes a lot of sense, like, once you think about it.
Yeah.
Red Riding Hood being a barbarian, like, that's an interesting way to do it. And they made it, what I liked about the premise of Never After is you aren't railroaded, right? Because it's not your average... You're not having to necessarily fulfill Little Red Riding Hood to a T. There's like, it's different somehow. So like, you're playing the trope of Little Red Riding Hood without the railroads of like, okay, well, time to get my granny out of a wolf, like that kind of a thing. So I think that's an interesting way to go about it. Anyway.
Yeah, I agree. We also talked a little bit about what kinds of characters it would be fun outside of like these storybook characters, what kinds of characters would be fun to create a party of. And I thought it would be really fun to have like the librarian like get sucked in. So like maybe they're like a little bit of the lore keeper for the group and they are very knowledgeable about all these stories. And then maybe after we talked to TJ a little bit more about it, if Candlekeep instead was in a setting like Strixhaven, so maybe just like the school of Strixhaven, their library is like where this is taking place instead, then maybe you have this whole slew of like Breakfast Club-esque like party members who kind of come together and they're all
the librarian could be a wizard because they're very like study based, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then like you wrote here, the kid who cuts class, like that feels like a rogue.
Yeah.
The popular girl could be like the class clown would be a bard. So then popular girl could be like a druid or something. No, that's too hippie. What would she be? Could she be a barbarian and like freak out when stuff doesn't go her way?
Yes, that would be so fun. Oh my gosh, because wouldn't I'm losing her name right now. I know her actual name in life. Isn't her name Charity?
What are you talking about?
Chastity?
What are you talking about?
Harmony?
What are you talking about?
I'm trying to say it out loud. I can't find the words to put things together. The actress in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, who is the popular girl. What is her name? Cordelia. You could have a character and make like kind of model her after Cordelia and have her be a barbarian. I just lost the words.
The teacher's pet could be a warlock. Their patron is the teacher.
Oh, that's so great. No, that'd be very fun. Yeah, what if like the teacher's pet was like having a like a lesson with the librarian or whatever, and then somehow the rest of the kids are coming in either for detention, literally via Breakfast Club, or some other reason for like a class that they all have to work on a group project. The bane of everyone's existence. Everyone has to come together for group projects, and maybe teacher's pet is like the head of the group, so they got there early. We're gonna write it. We're gonna do this one. But yeah,
okay,
that one is the one I'm most interested in and excited about. If you can't tell,
let's roll with it.
Yeah. Okay. Time to roll with it. What category, what table are we on this week?
Icebreaker, I believe.
Icebreaker. Dream taker.
That's a 17.
17?
Let's see. Favorite dessert? What is it? What is yours?
I'm gonna go with just what came top of mind. I love macarons so much. I like both versions of macarons. I like I don't know where the like coconut pieces version, like chocolate dipped, that's like a macaron or something like that. But then I love French macarons, like the cookie sandwich type dessert. I could eat those for days.
I'm a hooer for cookies. Any kind.
Okay, I was like, what kind of cookie?
Sometimes I want an Oreo. Sometimes I want a Nutter Butter. Sometimes I like the Keebler fudge graham. Grahams dipped in fudge. Sometimes I really love me like an oatmeal raisin. I love all cookies pretty much.
I'd say one of my absolute favorite cookies is literally the cookie sandwiches, like from Goldenrod.
Oh, sure.
Those are stupid good.
I do really like cookies. I am not somebody who eats a lot of cake. Not really here for cake. Pies only like for holidays, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So any other kind of like ice cream is fair game to me. Cookies, anything I can count as almost like a snack, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say outside of macarons, would probably be somewhere in the realm of like cheesecake or cake, but I also don't eat like tons and tons of cake. But I love a good like dessert loaf.
I'm thinking about what
like
I would
banana
go
bread.
for. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about what I would go for at like a Paper Moons. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I mean, aside from the breakfast stuff, less likely to go for like the cupcakes or a slice of cake or anything like that.
Sure.
And more for like the handheld situations.
Mm-hmm.
Brownies, Rice Krispies, those kinds of things.
Yeah, 100%. Mm-hmm. Boy, that one was easy-ish.
Yeah, surprisingly. Okay. Last one.
Jump into our final game setting that we would really like to play in. But I'm going to let Caitie do this one.
Okay.
Start it.
The other thing that we thought about when we were putting these together, I mean, we came up with quite a few and we narrowed it down to 3. The last one is like an ancient system or an ancient setting where it could be anywhere, but there's like some sort of a pantheon of gods, whether that's Greek or Egypt or Nordic or whatever you want to like insert pantheon of gods here. But you could kind of make it like that same idea as the cyberpunk or cyberpunk plus. You could do historical or like historical plus, where it's like you've got your day-to-day ancient living, or you could do ancient living plus magic and fantasy. But either way, and we kind of differ in our opinions about how we would want to play this. But I would want to be able to interact or be influenced by the pantheon of gods in some way. Now, that could be like champion of the gods, or I'm just like, you know, like in ancient Greece, everybody made offerings and like did stuff like that. So it's like, you know, maybe you're chosen for some reason to do a deed for Zeus or Artemis or Isis or, you know, Odin, whatever.
Oh, that does feel a little bit... I know that he's technically like in the same vein as Hercules, but that does feel very like Zagreus. Like he's doing things for them. He's technically part of them, but
yeah,
take out that little
kind
bit.
of, yeah. So like the way that myths work, right, is that a lot of people interpret them differently, and like there's some creative license there. As far as like Hades, the video game, Zagreus is trying to leave the underworld. That's the whole premise.
Right.
And the gods give him boons to like aid him on his efforts to get out of the underworld. So he's not necessarily fulfilling tasks or doing anything on behalf of a god per se.
Yeah, that's true. That's
but
fair.
Then you've got on the opposite end of things, and he is technically like a demigod, god himself, right?
Yeah.
Heracles, whatever. Similar, right? But he's put on, so he has some tasks that he does.
Yeah.
In order to achieve the demigodhood that he achieves. So, like, there could be a couple different threads there. Maybe you're everyday Joe who Hera knocks on your door and says, "Do this for me now."
Be demigod?
And you say, for you now? And she says, "Yep."
Anything for mother.
And then, or you could say like, maybe your goal is to achieve a demigod vibe, and you're Disney's Hercules, and you go to Zeus's temple and say like,
"Help, Dad."
Who am I? And he goes, "You could be demigod. Do you want to be demigod?" You know what I mean? So there's just like a lot of ways to play that. Now, Soren thinks it'd be fun, and I don't disagree with you, but I just would prefer the other one. That you want to play as a god.
Yeah. I think it would be fun. I think it'd be cool to like literally be Artemis or Persephone or one of those gods or goddesses. And I mean, Caitie brought up a fair point. She'd be like, I think that's really hard to balance from like a DM's perspective. And I agree. I just don't think it's impossible. So I think it'd be fun to figure out how that might be able to happen. But that's where we departed ways.
I also told her after this, within this conversation, that I would prefer to play something that doesn't already exist. So we had also talked about playing the like Odysseus, Theseus, Hercules, that kind of a thing.
Yep.
Like, I don't want to play something that the story already is written. I want to play somebody who doesn't have anything to do with it yet. Where, like, so think from a like Assassin's Creed perspective of just like, you're some person who exists in this time with these things and with these entities, and how do you, like, I'm adding a story to the pile rather than retelling a story that already exists. And the other thing that I would be curious about as far as the like playing as gods, I think there would be some interesting questions about like when within their current story does this exist? Are you playing as freshly baby Persephone, or are you playing as Persephone, queen of the underworld? And then what does that story of hers end up looking like within that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Actually, as you were starting to describe that, I started to think down that path, and I was like, oh, would it be fun to be like freshly hatched god or goddess, and like maybe the path is, you know, on your way to goddom or to god tier, and there's going to be so much like creative license that comes with that. Like, you're really just playing like a facet of something that already exists, but in that, I think what interests me most about playing an actual established god is the familiarity that people have with it already, and a lot of the like source material that might already be available to kind of craft that persona or that like idea. And that might be a little bit of the like theater creeping through, is like, I could study this character and then I could like give my own version of them. And I think that's what's most intriguing.
I'd also be interested to see what that looks like in a party setting.
Yeah.
So it's not just Artemis, but it's Artemis and these other
Artemis
randomly established gods. and Artemis and like gods that she perhaps wouldn't have otherwise associated with for some reason, and then having to work together towards a common goal somehow. That could also be interesting. So similarly to what you said about the familiarity of it. I think that's part of why things like Assassin's Creed are interesting, because you're like, this is a world that existed that I didn't get to be a part of. So I want to feel what it's like to be in that moment a little bit. And so like, I find it interesting to create a character in that era who lives in this world and whatever, and then see how that gets affected.
Still interface with all of those, the pantheons and the gods and goddesses that would have been part of your everyday life already.
And there's something fun about honoring that pantheon, that myth, as if it were so incredibly real, right? So saying like, Greek myths, okay, but like, what if they were real and the gods did commune with you in some way? Well,
and we spend most of, I think all of our like D&D experience and podcast so far talking about high fantasy and talking about this like complete departure from like reality. So I think there's a lot of draw and a lot of pull to like root a fantasy tabletop game in reality, kind of, but also still adding a tiny bit of actual fantasy back to it, but like rooting it in something that's that actually existed.
Right. And I think, like, in our Elrond game, we talk about the gods a little bit. Like, we've talked about Melora and Pelor, Asmodeus, and all of that kind of stuff. But that's kind of like the three that we've talked about. And we know other ones exist, but we don't necessarily, like, get into the canon around all of the gods that might or could or do exist. You know what I'm saying? We focus kind of on those three and maybe a couple others that are subsets. So I also think it's interesting from that perspective to be in a game where we, like, if you were playing in ancient Greece, right? You know the Zeus and the Hera, and like we also are aware of like some of the story that goes around them and revolves around them. Like Zeus is
like
doing people left and right, and you know, like that kind
too
of
many
thing.
kids, and like as much as we, like you just said, as much as we know all of the gods that we have discussed, we don't always know all of the interrelational lore about them, only as much as we can at this point in our game. And I think that type of familiarity is also a big draw.
It's the same reason I think why like a Percy Jackson is interesting, right? Because you get to see these like personified versions, or like Lore Olympus, why you get to see these personified versions of the gods that you've heard stories about and how they might interact. And I, of course, prefer Hades to Lore Olympus, right? The game to the comic.
Yes.
Hades is like mean dad.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Mean big boy dad, like bulky as
mean
heck.
Like looks like Christmas spirit dad.
Right. Whereas Hades in Lore Olympus is like this lithe
he's this like slinky
guy.
Suave businessman that's actually
caring on the inside,
kind of like a baby girl on the inside.
So I'd also be interested to play in a game where it's like somebody else has taken yet another iteration
of Hades
or Zeus or whatever, and like you kind of know what you're gonna expect, but you also kind of don't, because you don't know how they're gonna play them. I don't know, that familiarity with some creative license, I think, is also what intrigues me about that system. That's the system or setting that I'm most interested in. The couple of systems that we did find, though, there is a system called Agon. That's more about the like heroes of Greece. So that's your Odysseus, your Theseus, your god
Achilles.
What's that line from Hercules? Theseus gladiuses. You know what I'm saying? What that Phil says.
I was saying, does it come out of Phil?
He's talking about Achilles. Wait, I need to find this. It's hurting me. I trained all those would-be heroes: Odysseus, Perseus, Theseus, a lot of yeses. You know what I mean? And every one of those bums let me down flatter than a discus. So anyway, those guys.
Those ones.
And it's you're coming home from war and like your life after that. And somebody on Reddit said that was not so much your day-to-day. It's like very much like heroes doing heroic things.
Like you're stabbing a big old basilisk.
Right.
In the first session.
Jumping off of roofs, you know, things like that. So that's a whole other system. There was also one called Mazes and Minotaurs that I've seen a lot of people recommend. That's its own like system. A little more D&D based, but with the ancient Greek like background. So if you took D&D and took the Tolkien out and put like ancient Greek in, that's kind of your vibe. And then there was an actual D&D module, Mythic Odysseys of Theros, which we didn't read too much about, but that's like D&D's version of that. And similarly, everything we've talked about so far, I mean, you could do that, or you could take a homebrewed setting, take D&D classes, and skin them for ancient Greece or ancient Egypt, whatever you were looking to do. And that would be a way to handle that as well.
Yeah, we've focused on Greek gods and goddesses, but like we also think it'd be really fun to try out like Norse mythology and the Egyptian mythology also. I think that'd be, any of these are really cool because it's still leaning into that these were real gods that people actually believed in the world that is reality.
Right.
But it's not it's not quite D&D.
Same vibe as the Oscar Isaac Marvel.
Oh,
You know what I'm talking about?
Moon Knight.
Moon Knight. Same vibe.
Yes.
You know, and like seeing this like giant
bird,
like, or whatever, like, you know, maybe you keep the gods as like huge beings, kind of like your Critical Role Calamity, right?
I think.
Yes, I think so. The Calamity. That one where they talk, Brennan like literally describes these gods being massive, like gigantic. You are so small in the palm of their hand. Like that could still be an interesting way. Maybe Hera doesn't show up at your door. Maybe you look out and the sun is literally looking in.
Maybe you're looking at the ocean and Poseidon peeks his head up and is like, hey, I need a champion. Like,
I need something from you. Can you run to the store for me?
Yeah, absolutely.
That could be an interesting way to like visualize that as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, I'm curious, what are your setting wish list bullets? Where do you want to play?
Yeah, what kinds of settings are appealing to you, and hit that wish list. Please tell us.
Now I really want to play in an ancient Greek setting.
And now I really want to play in a big library. We can do both at different times.
I was like,
wait a minute. I don't want
to
Alexandria complicate it.
That's it for us this week. Thanks for spending time with us today. Thanks to Noah Trumbull for the use of our theme song. There's a link to his Instagram in the episode description. Make sure you give him a follow. See what he's up to with his music lately.
If you're enjoying the show, there are a couple things we would love if you do. First, please leave us a review. Reviews just help other people find us and know that we're a reputable show, that you enjoy us, that we're cool enough for your ears. So please, go ahead, leave us a review. Secondly, we would love if you'd follow us on all of our social platforms. We are on Facebook and Instagram dominantly, and nothing else.
Not another thing.
But yeah, when you follow us there, then you can stay up to date on all of the cool stuff that we have coming up for you guys. We stream every once in a while. Caitie dominantly streams video games when she does. And
haven't in a while, but
if you'd like to see other kinds of like streaming content from us in the future, please let us know. I think it'd be really fun to do like a co-working like art stream and like draw, maybe like take recommendations and whatnot. So either way, please follow us on those platforms so that you can see what's up next.
We also want to hear from you. We just asked if you could share your favorite settings with us. You can do that in the comments on the YouTube video. You could do that on our episode post for today, or you could just send us an email if you'd rather that not be a public thing that you share. You could also suggest some topics for us if there are things that you wish we would talk about or want to hear us talk about, or somebody you want us to hear us talk to. That would also be an interesting thing.
We love those.
You can email us at chromaroses@gmail.com, CHROMAROSES@gmail.com. It's all lowercase, and we really can't wait to hear from you. So,
this has been Chromatic Roses. I'm Soren.
And I'm Caitie. Mommy, those hobbies.
Okay, love you. Bye.